I think that one-on-ones need to be only about that employee. What do they want out of their career? What motivates and inspires them? Getting into intrinsic values. How are they feeling today? What questions do they have? What do they need for me to be helpful and supportive? Like, just needs to be like wrapping your arms around that employee, and it needs to happen on a regular basis. And I, in fact, used to structure later in my leadership path, I would structure my one-on-ones with my team and tell them, like, if you want to talk about a project, it's fine, it's your agenda to set, but that's not my intention, right? My intention is to support your development, give you whatever you need to be successful. And it was amazing, the conversations that we would have because of that.
Welcome to Leadership Disrupted. Now, if you're a frequent listener to this podcast, you know that our uber premise is that employees today are restless. They want more, they want different. They're also resistant. They don't automatically respect their leaders. They don't automatically jump for their leaders. Their engagement tends to be earned, not simply given. And they're rewired to think and act and communicate differently. And many leaders, maybe most leaders, seem to not be meeting this moment very effectively. And Tami Chapek is going to be perfect for today's conversation because her personal mission, as she says on her LinkedIn page, is to end the bad boss epidemic. And with nearly 25 years of experience across corporate leadership, operations, and strategic growth, Tami has seen firsthand the staggering cost of poor leadership. As the author of Leadership Redefined, and we'll give you more information about the book if you look at the show notes, the tagline is "Define the Ordinary to Unleash Potential." And Tami helps organizations move beyond standard management practices. And so, Tami, first of all, welcome. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. There's so much for us to talk about. So let's start with you. Maybe there are parts of your story or background you'd like to share with us to kind of fill in the picture before we dive a little deeper.
Sure. Well, and thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here today. But really, my heart for leadership and my heart for defying the ordinary started on my own personal journey. When I was 26, I was promoted to be a manager for the first time, and I was so excited and had all the good feels and stuff with that. But I didn't really know how to be a good leader, and I certainly didn't think about my approach. And inherently, I believed, well, if I've done such a good job to get promoted, then everybody should do it exactly like I do. So I was totally a micromanager. I was controlling with information. I was demanding. I mean, all the things that I would never want to do if I had any intention going into it. So I really learned.
You like me, as a young leader, I thought my job was to stamp out little Dan, because yes. Obviously you hired me, so I must be the model, and so I'm like a factory. I'm gonna stamp those out.
Yes.
It takes a while to realize, oh, wait a minute, no, that's not really leadership.
Yeah. And so I had that hiccup. I had several others, but I quickly realized, like, I have to figure this out. No one's going to do it for me. I got to find my style, my way. And then I became super passionate about helping my team, both people that reported to me or people that I mentored in the organization, to really figure out their way, right? Their style. Yeah. And that has then obviously fed into a whole new career for me. I'm, leadership development specialist now. Written a book, all the things. So that's how it all started, was little Tami Chapek being a bad boss.
So what's your take on what is changing in the workplace? Because now you're younger than I am, but you're still of enough of an age where you remember the world pre-pandemic. And something has changed, because leadership books have been written for decades, but it does feel to me like, and no disrespect to anybody intended, but Ken Blanchard isn't enough. Like Franklin Covey, not enough. There's this old playbook that isn't bad,
right?
But just doesn't feel like enough for today. But what's your take on that?
Yeah, several things really, but I think historically, if we look back at the Ken Blanchards of the world, and the John Maxwell's of the world, right? Like there was a formula. You do these things and you will be a good boss, right? And at that time, it did serve the population because it was a lot more of a dictatorial relationship. I tell you what to do, you go do it. We've really evolved. And if you look at even just the generational nuances between Z's to millennial, or X's to millennials, to Z's to alphas, right? Like very distinct changes in characters and beliefs, very much more value-based individuals stepping into the world, very much individuality stepping into the world. And so this idea of cookie cutter, do the same for everybody, right? Or stamp out little Tami Chapeks, right? Like it doesn't work anymore. And so leaders really have to be able to adapt and shift their styles based off of who they're working with. And that's totally foreign to the old concepts.
I do know, though, that some people listening to this are going to react negatively to the use of the word cookie cutter and stamping out and dictatorial, because they'll say to you or to me, I was never a dictator. I was never overbearing. In fact, I was a very kind and courteous and servant leader, which probably is very true. But if you can be a servant leader in an environment where everyone is aligned, everyone shows up kind of looking the same, dressing the same, acting the same, everyone shows up giving you automatic respect because of your position. And in that environment, you can whisper and people will move. You can gently nudge and people will move. So yeah, you can be kind and gentle and you don't even necessarily know that it's the environment that's serving you, that's driving you forward, because there's an expectation. You're the leader. You have the authority. I was hired to do what you want me to do. And the world has just shifted.
Yeah, and by no means am I trying to say that that was bad. It was great for the time. It was great for the individuality that people required or needed at that time. But we're in a different world now where everyone is social media, right? Like everyone has different belief systems, different value systems, different interests, different career growth objectives. I mean, like there's such a new individuality coming into it that the former models of, to your point, in earned authority right out of the gate, right? That just doesn't happen anymore.
Right. And I was talking to a couple of leaders a few weeks ago about the level to which they are under the microscope from their employees. And I said, you may not realize it, but your employees, they check you out on social media. They check your family out. They check your kids out. If your daughter posts something on her Instagram account, it reflects on you. They know where you live. They can look you up on Google Maps. They will see you. They will see where you live, the kind of house that you live in, what you drive. There is, in many cases, I'd say in some cases, a sense of inequity because they see the life that you live and they contrast it with the life that they live, or they see the life of others on social media. And no matter what, right or wrong, there is a growing sense of inequity. There is a growing sense of, wait a minute, what's fair about this relationship? If I'm working and I watch you sit in your office and I don't see you working as much as I'm working, it can, again, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying I know that many employees look at their employers, particularly the senior leaders, with a bit of a squinty eye. Like, I don't really know that this is right.
Well, I think the bigger opportunity here is to think about individuality, right? So to your point, like we can find anything about anybody that we want online, and a lot of people spend the time to do that. But for the most part, I think the intent is to get to know them as a person, not as the boss, not as the colleague, not as the employee that they work with, because there's this sense of, again, this personalization in the world that we're in right now. So even though there can certainly be the downside, the squinty eyes, as you're mentioning, I think the bigger intention to it is I want to know you as a person. I want that vulnerability. I want that relationship. I want that connection. And when they don't get it, that's where maybe the squinty eyes and the feelings of inequality step in. But I think when they can get that connection and they have that, like, oh, you're investing in me, I'm investing in you, this is a symbiotic relationship, then I will follow along.
And I will acknowledge my somewhat cynical bent, because I think part of where it comes from is when I wrote my first book, Workplace Poker. That book was about navigating interpersonal dynamics in the office, navigating interpersonal politics in the office. And when it was launched, it was many years ago, I think like 7 years ago. What started happening is people began reaching out to me to tell their stories. And of course, people don't reach out to say, hey, this fantastic thing happened to me at work and I wanted to share it with you. Mostly it was the opposite. It was like, this horrible thing happened. And even to this day, at least once or twice a week, I get either an email or a text message, something from someone who wants to say, hey, this thing happened, and do you have any guidance or advice? And so you hear those kinds of stories every week for 7 years. Yeah, I can index a little too much into the.
It's fair, but honestly, human behavior, like we grow more in difficult times. We remember negative more than positive. You know that old saying, like you have to get like 10 compliments to overcome one negative piece of, like, so it is a little bit of human nature to laser in on those difficult things. And the fact that you've kind of like done an all call, like share your stories with me, makes sense.
So then when you are giving advice, either individually or to a group of leaders, where does it start? I mean, how do you help them understand this world of defiance? I mean, you have defy right in your title, which I loved. It grabbed me because I think it speaks to this this sense of, you don't own my spirit, you don't own me, and you have to, if you want my respect, if you want my trust, okay, earn it. I mean, that's a new world for a lot of leaders.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the challenge as I see it is, in organizations, there is a kind of standard path to leadership, right? And I use leadership loosely because I don't think you have to have the title to be a leader, but a lot of people will say it that way, right? So, you become a really strong individual contributor, you move into your first management role, and then you'll become a leader of leaders. And so there's a path. Very rarely is there customization to like the training associated with it, if a company even offers leadership development, right? So some do, a lot don't. Or if the company even offers a coach to kind of help you through it, right? So like very rarely do you get to figure out like, oh, this is how I'm going to do it different than how they're going to do it. We just are naturally, we emulate behaviors. And the challenge with emulating behaviors, and it's, again, natural human tendencies, how kids learn how to walk and talk and all the things, right? The challenge with that is that we then are emulating somebody else's values, somebody else's strengths, someone else's style and approach, and not really honoring who we are and what works differently for us. And I, personal story on that, as I was having all my trips and falls in my first years of leadership, right? I had a couple of very strong personality male bosses, that I was modeling my behavior after. And so, I don't want to necessarily get into gender nuances here, right? But like for me to come out as this kind of very strong-willed, vocal, I was kind of doing what they were doing, and then all of a sudden I'm labeled aggressive and assertive and too much, right? So I had to take a step back and say, like, what are my strengths? What are those things that are different for me? And how can I use those to my advantage? And that's where I think this defiance, where this opportunity is like, just because it works for you that way, cool, right? Yeah. But it's going to work for me in a slightly different way. We can still get to the same end result, maybe even better results, but I can't walk the same exact path that you walked down.
I remember in my earliest years, there's so many embarrassing moments where I think, did I really, as a leader, I said that, or I asked them to do that. There was a moment when I was a sales leader, young, mid-20s, and I was so full of vim and vigor and drive, and I was ambitious, but my ambition really got in the way of my ambition. And I remember a particular meeting where I wanted to motivate my sales team. And the way I motivated them was, I said, if each of you hits your numbers, this is what it will mean for me. I literally told them, if you all hit your numbers, I will get X. And I had decided, if I arrive at X, that I was going to buy myself a particular car. Not surprisingly, it was a red Porsche. And I had a picture of a red Porsche. And this is so cringe-inducing to share this with you. But I showed them the red Porsche that I would be able to buy if they hit their goals.
Yeah.
And I look back now and I think, no, man, that's just so wrong. And I know most leadership mistakes are not that bad, but nobody told me. I mean, nobody coached me.
Yeah.
I had a guy that I was modeling, in the organization, and it's the sort of thing he would have said that shamelessly. He would have been like, God damn it, you guys go because I need you to go for my reasons. And so
Yeah.
Becoming an effective leader in today's world, it is a learning experience for sure.
Well, and I think to just fall back on what you just said, right? You said most people's mistakes or language isn't that bad, but I think it is, right? You look at Gallup data, 70+% of people leave their jobs because of a boss. So I mean, 70% of the bosses in this world are saying things that are offensive or creating toxic environments or not setting their team members up for success in whatever way, right? There's reasons people are leaving by the masses, right? So I think people are doing that.
I read a global survey result, and globally speaking, most leaders rate themselves as above average communicators. Well, if you do the math, 70% of you can't be above average. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, I remember reading a stat like that was same and talking about like, I think I'm a great leader. I think I have these great competencies. And it was again, like a highly inflated number. And then they pulled the team members for that same opinion, what their perception was. And it was like 80% versus 20%. I mean, it was just a significant difference.
And that you have to ask yourself, how does a leader develop such a bubble around them where they perceive themselves so differently than the people around them perceive them? But that bubble is real. And even if you just have a small team, if you're a frontline leader with a small team of 4 or 5 people, there's still going to be a bubble around you. The moment you have a bit of control over someone else's career, over their work hours, their progression, whatever it might be, then people start to be thoughtful and cautious about what they share with you. And they start to edit what they share with you. And then depending upon your leadership style, you will either accentuate that, like make them even more and more cautious, or if you're very intentional, you might be one of those rare leaders who actually draws people out to be really authentic.
Yeah. And I think that's the goal, right? Is we can't keep walking into these relationships and again, being like, go do the work, be a machine, do the things. Like it is about the individuality and like knowing the person. And so the more that leader knows the individuals on their team and the more that they know him or her, right, the easier it is to have those conversations, to not set people up for failure unintentionally, to not upset people. I mean, like there's so many things that just boils down to human relationship, right? And really kind of honoring who each person is in the dynamic.
For sure. And as a self-check, I would ask anybody watching this who has a team that you lead, I would ask you to just think, how frequently do you have one-on-ones with each of your team members? Most people would recommend at least weekly that you have a 30-minute one-on-one, but those weekly 30-minute one-on-ones are fading away. They're happening less and less frequently. And what I hear from employees is that those one-on-ones, they get booked. Maybe it's bi-weekly or instead of weekly, but they get booked. But then they're the first meetings to get canceled when something else arises.
Yeah.
One young lady, she said to me, I might get 1 out of 3. Like I have a meeting every week with my manager and I count on it not happening. I've learned that it generally doesn't happen. And it gets canceled if we don't have any current projects to discuss, if we don't have any current tasks. Basically for her, those meetings are very logistical or operational meetings, and it's never about her. So I would ask, if you're listening to this, ask yourself, how frequently do you have one-on-ones? What's the nature of those one-on-ones? Are they operational? Which of course there has to be some, but I would think maybe 1/3 operational, 2/3 human.
Yeah, I have a real strong opinion on that.
Please share.
And I think it goes back to this kind of defiance of the model, right? And I think historically we do have these one-on-ones and it's a touch base on how's the work, what obstacles can I get out of your way, what resources do you need? And it's all about the work. But I think it needs to be like the exact opposite. Like Every organization has some kind of a status meeting in some capacity. Like we know where the projects are. That's a team conversation, usually not just a one person conversation. I think that one-on-ones need to be only about that employee. What do they want out of their career? What motivates and inspires them? Getting into intrinsic values. How are they feeling today? What questions do they have? What do they need for me to be helpful and supportive? Like just needs to be like wrapping your arms around that employee, and it needs to happen on a regular basis. And I, in fact, used to structure later in my leadership path, I would structure my one-on-ones with my team and tell them, like, if you want to talk about a project, it's fine, it's your agenda to set, but that's not my intention, right? My intention is to support your development, give you whatever you need to be successful. And it was amazing the conversations that we would have because of that. We have team status meetings. Like I knew where projects were, and if I had a question, I could always follow up, or they could come to me on, outside of that. But the one-on-ones were dedicated to them and them alone.
And employees today, whether they will say it or not, some will, but many of your most talented employees, they're high performers. They want to do a great job. That's how they're built. And they don't want to be needy. So when you ask them, they may say, well, it's no big deal. I don't need that. But the reality is most of them are yearning for it.
Yeah.
But they're yearning for the authentic version of it,
Yes.
not okay, I booked this and I'm going to go through, how are you doing?
Yes.
Okay.
So not just checking a box.
Tell me about your family. How is, insert wife's name. How is your young daughter?
Right.
It has to come from your heart as a leader. And I think that is a struggle for many leaders, and I'm not beating up on leaders, because I know that leaders are overwhelmed as well.
Yeah.
The pace, the complexity, just the number of direct reports. Back in the 80s, it might be 1 to 7, whereas today it can be easily 1 to 10, 1 to 12. And then you add to that, many leaders today are being asked to be player coaches. Like, hey, we want you to actually do and lead. So you have a set of projects where you are the doer, plus you're the leader, so you add even more to them. So I do have empathy for leaders who feel overwhelmed and feel like the idea of being the coach, the mentor, sometimes the parent, the guide, it can feel unrealistic and overwhelming to them. What do you say to a leader who says, it's just, I don't think it's realistic in my particular environment?
I think it goes back to what kind of leader do you want to be, and then B, how do you make those thoughtful choices and to, where you're spending your time and energy. And I appreciate that player coach mindset. That was the role that I played for years, and it's always that balance. But you have to prioritize the people first. Especially, I came from a service-based industry, right? But the people are what make things work. And if the people are broken or hurting or challenged, right, nothing's going to happen. And I think this is like a real basic thing, but everybody, no matter who they are, needs to feel seen, heard, and valued. And by spending that 15 minutes, 30 minutes a week with them to help them feel seen, heard, and valued will pay dividends in what they're bringing into the office, the energy that they have, the commitment that they have to the work, to their careers, to investing in the company longer term, right? So it will pay off. It might not feel like it in the beginning because you're doing more work to get there, but it will pay off.
I would encourage leaders today. We all educate ourselves. We read things. We watch and listen to things. The more you become a student of humans and humanity, not a student of business, but a student of humans, because in the effort to help people feel seen and valued, known in the workplace, human beings are complicated people. They are complicated creatures. There are many layers. One of my favorite quotes is from Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. He says, I contain multitudes. The humans around you, if you really get to know them, you will find layers and layers and layers of depth in those humans.
Yeah.
And so helping them feel seen and known and respected and valued is more than just a couple of knowledge checks. It is really having the desire to know, to crack the code on every individual human. And I think that if you make that effort, it can become the most valuable or valued part of your role as a leader. Once you get there, once you're doing that, that's the part that you enjoy the most, or can be. It's not moving the OKRs forward,
Yeah.
or the projects forward,
Yeah.
or delivering on budget and on time. Those are good things, but they may not be the part of your leadership that you value the most.
Yeah. And this approach isn't going away, right? So we look at, again, generational trends. The alpha generation coming in is even more demanding around the individuality and what will I do, how much they're going to work, and what are they going to invest in. And so it's amazing to see, like where we continue to shift as a human society into this world of like, I just have some fundamental needs that need to be checked off here. Otherwise, I'm not going to do the work.
I had a leader say to me, out of a sense of frustration, what we need is a good recession. Because if we can get a good recession, they'll appreciate the jobs more. They'll be more grateful. And I could, just as he was talking to me, I could visualize him standing on a porch with his cane, shaking it at those damn young folks as they walk by, and he was so adamant. I just had to kind of let that go.
Yeah.
But I believe you are absolutely right. This is where we're moving. It is going to be more and more so, not less. And even if we have a recession, even if someone needs the job, if they get a sense from you as a leader that you're just not it for them, it is pretty easy to, you're looking at your screen. Oh, there's LinkedIn. Oh, LinkedIn has a jobs button. I'll click on that LinkedIn jobs button. And LinkedIn, whether it's right or wrong, is happy to say to you, here are some jobs for which you'd be a perfect fit. LinkedIn will love to serve up some opportunities for you. So there is an easiness of looking at other opportunities. It's right there. So you do have to work harder as a leader to retain people and to create an environment that draws them in as opposed to repelling them.
The number one thing from a PwC study, right? Like the number one thing people ask for that will encourage that loyalty, that long-term staying in an organization, it isn't the money, it's feeling invested in, right? So you're developing them, you're spending time with them, you're helping to build their skill set, expand their thought process. Like when people feel invested in, they will invest back. And I think we always go to money or titles, like, got to give them, and that's not always the case.
The money has to be within a zone of reason, like whatever the zone of reason might be, and money is not unimportant. I had someone say to me, I haven't had a raise in 4 years, and she said, what bugs me the most about it is no one talks to me about it. She said, if my boss just said, hey, we're in a tight spot, we're all kind of going steady state for the coming year or for the coming 2 years, whatever it might. She said, if someone would just talk to me, I could get it. But in fact, it's like this mystery that I start off every year wondering, is there going to be a cost of living increase? And I just have to wait and see. Now, she said, now shame on me. I probably should go to my manager and have this conversation proactively.
Yeah.
But is that really my job? This is her talking to me. And she's not wrong. Someone should have a conversation with her. Yeah. You mentioned coaching. And I know you deliver training programs for leaders. Do you also do individual coaching for leaders?
Yeah, we do. And so I have a team of 8 people, including myself, and 7 of us are coaches. And so we balance between the training and facilitation and coaching. My 8th person is I call her my career storyteller. She's helps job seekers or people who are outplaced to find a new role. But yeah, from a coaching perspective, and I think I fell in love with the profession unintentionally. I took coaching classes to be a better boss, like on my own path. And I was like, wow, I can spend time helping people and helping them see differences in themselves and set their goals and achieve and all the things. And so it's a huge part of why I shifted out of marketing and into what I do and into starting We Inspire We. But we offer one-on-one coaching. We also do team coaching. And so we have a lot of like team effectiveness challenges where there's broken trust, communication issues, right? And we'll come in and have some really vulnerable, open conversations to get people to open up and think a little bit differently about those dynamics.
So describe to me the difference. I mean, I think I can understand it. You have training, people come into a room for a training experience, or that might be virtual, live training experience.
Yeah,
And then team coaching is that different than training?
it is.
So maybe share your point of view on all three: training, team coaching, and then one-on-one coaching.
Sure. Yeah. So training is going to be specific content, right? So we want to make sure you get these 4 points and have, the ability to interact with them and really understand them and bring real world application into them. And so there's something more like concrete walking into it, right? So I want you to learn about conflict management, and here's what we do. So that's training, and training can certainly be one topic or many topics. So we do a lot of leadership development programs that are kind of soup to nuts, take you through a whole program.
Sure.
Team coaching is a little bit different because we're not training on content. There might be key points that we make along the way, but it's really an open conversation. And so let's say, for example, my example of communication issues on a team, right? So we might talk a little bit about good communication looks like what, and have the team, everyone kind of fill in the gaps, right? And then maybe challenge each other a little bit in there and say, what's working for you today versus what isn't, right? And identify those. And so then we talk about that some more. And so knowing that there's a breakdown in our ability to share, right? Like, what do we want to do with that, right? So it's more asking questions and guiding people. And the conversation could go in a lot of different directions, but really kind of helping them see that there's a path that they can go down collectively. Coaching, one-on-one coaching, is similar in that it's kind of could go in a lot of directions, right? But ultimately, your coachee has set some goals for themselves. Let's say I want to be more confident in my leadership skills. I want to be able to have maybe work on soft skills, and I'm making stuff up, right? So we would then have a series of coaching sessions to talk through those things. Like what does good look like? What's keeping you from doing that today? Yada, yada, yada. There's always exercises or some kind of action coming out of it. So I like to think about coaching as like performance acceleration, really helping you maximize those goals. Team is more like alignment. How do we come together on a thing? And then obviously training that is more contextual.
I'm a big fan of one-on-one coaching. I mean, in the hands of a good coach. I talk about what I was like in my 20s as a sales manager. I'm going to share one more example of how much Dan sucked as a leader, but don't have a misimpression that I just sucked.
We all have to learn somehow.
Yeah, I mean, I had strengths as well, but sometimes it's the downside that is more interesting. And so I had been up for a promotion, and I thought it was a perfect promotion. I was the perfect candidate for it. I thought everything was green lights, and I didn't get the promotion. And the feedback that I got from the team that did the interviews was, hey, you have a lot of strengths. We just think you need more development as a leader before taking on this higher role. And to the company's credit, they said, we think you would benefit from some one-on-one coaching. And what we will do is we will give you a budget and allow you to select your own coach. They gave me some suggestions. And because I was really angry at them, I threw away all their suggestions. I went and I found my own coach. But I got one-on-one coaching on their dime. And it was a 6-month program. And for the first 2 months of that program, mostly my coach was asking questions. We were having good dialogue. I wasn't necessarily getting much out of it, but I was getting a little. It was okay. And then it was somewhere between the 2 and 3 month mark. It started to feel a little more productive. And then at a certain point, as I became more comfortable with him, he said, because he had been talking to my colleagues. So he basically did a human 360 feedback. So he had been given permission to reach out and have conversations with people, which honestly, it frustrated me at first. I did not like that idea. I said to him, you're basically having conversations behind my back with everybody that I work with, which was true. Then, but at a certain point, I had eased up with him, and he said, here's some feedback for you that I would hope you really take a moment to internalize this. He said, when I first met you, you were serious, determined, ambitious, almost robotic. He said, not, you weren't a robot, but you were really serious. And he said, now that I know you, you're actually funny sometimes. You're easygoing. You like to laugh. You tell a decent joke sometimes. There's a humanness to you
Mm-hmm.
that I don't think your colleagues experience.
Mm-hmm.
You and I, he said to me, Dan, have had conversations about TV shows that you like, movies that you like, experiences that you've had. You as a human, I don't think you've shared any of that with any of your colleagues. They would describe you as robotic, as very efficient, very good, very talented, all good, but you might want to try bringing some of that humor
Mm-hmm.
and humanity to the role. Now, I was an engineer. I'm not naturally charming, and so it was work. But he got my attention, and I remember the young woman I was dating. I spoke with her that evening, and I said, "Hey, here's some feedback that I've gotten." And as I'm recounting this to her, she's nodding. She's like, "Yeah, uh-huh, uh-huh." And I said, "Wait, so you think I'm a robot?" And she said, "Well, you're not one now." But she said, "You were." She said, "When we first started dating, you did everything right. Everything was right, but there was just something missing."
Mm-hmm.
And she said, "I can imagine it being very hard to work for you because of you, because of who." And that wake up call would never have happened in a
Yeah.
training room. It never would have happened in a team call. It had to be a one-on-one thing with a particularly skilled person who could see it and then deliver it to me in a way where I would
Yeah.
accept it. And I will tell you that moment, that it didn't change overnight, but my awareness changed. And I would say from that moment, I began trying to be less perfect, more human, more interested in other people than in myself
Mm-hmm.
and in the tasks, all of the things that you're talking about. It was probably a 10-year journey to ultimately feel like I had arrived. But I'm a huge fan of one-on-one coaching when it's applied properly.
Yes, for sure. And I do think, like, to you said one of the comment you made earlier, and I just want to highlight it for the audience again, is like,
Sure.
you had to build a relationship with that coach, right? Like, you have to feel really comfortable with opening up and being able to have conversations. And it's not therapy in that we're going way back into old childhood wounds, right? But it is talking a lot about your opinion, your perspective, your feelings, like what's going on in your world, how are you seeing things? And the coach hears what's said, here's what's not said, knows your goals, right? And then can really offer challenges or different perspectives to consider. I truly, and obviously I'm biased because I am one, but in no other relationship in life do you have, not even with a therapist, where they have skin in the game or they don't have skin in the game. Like, coach is there to support you and you alone and has no other intentions, right? Your loved ones want what's best for you, but through their lens. Your boss wants best for you, but through the business's lens, right? Like, so there's always some bias in there. But the coach doesn't have that, and it's a really powerful way to kind of to grow and to challenge yourself.
And while it may not be therapy, I would say most leaders could benefit from a deep contemplation of why they want to lead.
Yes.
Like a deep contemplation. Understand, what, because, and most will start with, well, I want to make a difference. They'll start with the high-minded.
Yeah.
But for many of us, I'll say us, if we really think deeply about this, we find that we grew up in a world where we didn't feel we had control, and we want that control. We want that certainty. There's a reason why we want to lead others. And I think identifying that reason for us can be helpful. It doesn't have to be therapy, but sometimes it needs to be. Sometimes you need to find that part of yourself, or be reminded of that part of yourself. Why are you working harder than anybody else? Why are you driving faster than anybody else? Why are you, what are you either moving toward, or what are you trying to avoid? And sometimes it's a bit of both. But self-awareness, I think, is hugely important for a leader. Particularly, we talked about that bubble before. that bubble can be so insulating that if you are, as a leader, aren't hyper focused on who am I, how am I being perceived, how am I growing, why am I doing what, all of those questions, you're going to have to be your own therapist
Yeah.
because the authentic feedback is not going to be coming to you in the same way that maybe it was when you were an individual contributor.
Yeah.
I'll give you a really quick example. If you're one of those leaders who tends to not show up on time for meetings, but nobody ever complains about it, nobody ever says to you, making us wait for 3 to 5 minutes at the beginning of every one of your meetings, it just feels a little disrespectful. We know you're busy. Yeah, of course you're busy, like the rest of us.
Yeah.
We're all busy. But we know that if there's a meeting with you, you're going to show up late, and then the meeting's going to go long because you'll give yourself the permission to make the meeting go long. So we're always a little uncomfortable whenever you're in a meeting. Now, if you are one of those leaders, and there are a lot of them, it wouldn't surprise me if you never get that feedback. But that is what's really happening is you are. And so I would just ask for you to think about why would you do that? Well, you would do that because you're not getting feedback, because no one is saying, look, God bless you, but we need to start on time and we need to end on time. Could you maybe do that and set a model for us for the rest of the organization? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to derail this, but
no, but I think it's an interesting point. It's that kind of, as leaders, is our focus on us or is it on the environment around us? And so the leaders that show up late, they excuse it because they're busy and they're the most important person in the room, loosely speaking, right? So it's like, how do we flip that around? How do we show intention versus impact and what's really going on there? And I think it's an interesting place to be, to get that feedback and to see those blind spots and to understand like how you're being received or perceived. Perception's reality, right? Like, so, and to know what to do with that. And a huge part of my like authenticity platform is really that self-discovery. Like, what are the things that are working for me? What are the things that are getting in my way? What do I want to be? Like, if people are talking about me and I'm not in the room, what do I want them to be saying about me?
Yeah.
And really setting that intention to lean into those things versus showing up 5 minutes late every time.
I had a senior leader who did say to me after some self-work, he put some time into becoming more self-aware. He said, I realize now I developed this habit of showing up 3 to 5 minutes late because I was really uncomfortable with those, like when meetings start and there's that human chit chat, and it's like we're all kind of chatting with each other before the official start. That made me uncomfortable. So I would like to wait until everyone has arrived, everyone's kind of ready to go, and then I can just go up, I can just show up, I can sit down, and we get started, and we avoid all of that. And he once he had that self-realization, he realized how not good that was. And in fact that human chit chat at the beginning of meetings, it is part of being a human leader. It is part of connecting with people. It's what we would do around a campfire. Yeah. It's what we would do in any kind of social environment. Even when there's a task at hand, we connect with each other. We check in with each other. We get a gauge on how people are doing, and then we start. And he just recognized that there was a deeper reason why he was showing up late, which is good. The realization was good, and it changed his behavior pretty quickly.
Yeah, I always say awareness is half the battle, right? If you don't know,
yeah, absolutely.
About it. So you got to get that discovery first.
How are you, as you see, the training sessions that you deliver, what your team delivers, the coaching that you're doing, as you look at the workplace landscape, I guess, how would you describe the world of work today?
I mean, certainly every company is different, every culture is different, every industry is different, but I think there's so much more intensity, so much more pressure. Coming from an advertising world with lots of intensity and pressure, I feel like that's just kind of everywhere now. People are wearing multiple hats, being tasked with extra work. And then you have this juxtaposition of individuals being like younger individuals, which I love that they do this, right? Like, no, you don't pay me to work more than 40 hours, right? Like there's like a line in the sand all of a sudden. So it's frustrating leaders because they can't just dictate that they go do the things. Or so I think there's some really interesting like pressures that are going to like burst very soon here.
Well, and I think those Gen Z, Gen Alpha attitudes are actually infusing their way into other generations as well. You can go even to the older generations. I think they're learning from these younger folks. You know, when someone says, I don't work to work, I don't live to work, I work to live. Hard to argue with that. And I've talked to a fair number of more mature employees who will say, you know, as much as I don't like some parts of their behaviors, I think they've got that part right. The whole work-life balance. And in fact, as I age, I'm not regretting, you know, any of the only things I'm regretting are when I over-indexed toward work, not toward life. So I do think that while we view it as a younger employee thing, I think it's ultimately going to be everybody. And then AI is going to rip the landscape apart, and then it'll get rebuilt in a new way. And while there probably will be a lot of pain in the process, my hope is that AI will in fact make our work lives easier. I hope.
I hope so too. I hope so too. We'll see, right? Lots of things to figure out, but I do agree. Like this younger generation really kind of challenging values and challenging how we show up. And I'll tell you, I was, you know, in advertising, I worked 60 hours a week easily every week, if not more. And now I'm like, 35, 40, that's good, you know, like, and I just think like there's so much more that I want to my life than just clocking in, clocking out. And there's the lifestyle, the American way forever has been clock in, clock out. That's how you define who you are. And I don't think that's the same anymore.
And in particular, because I work remotely primarily, although I do, you know, I'm out visiting with clients maybe once a month. I have found that I will put in my 8 or 10 hours a day, but it'll go in waves. Like I have my morning wave, and then I'm much more comfortable now taking 90 minutes to go for a walk and have a lunch, 2 hours, and then come back for my afternoon wave, but then take some time off, and then sometimes there'll be a late afternoon or evening wave. And if I add it all up, it's going to be 8, 9, 10 hours. Feels perfectly fine to me, but I do have boundaries. I have, and I found that I had to set boundaries, because if I simply worked, the business will take as much as I will give. I mean, no matter what,
there's always more work.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think what you're saying is interesting too, and kind of goes back, you know, again to authenticity, right? Like we got to figure out what works for us, and it's different for everybody. Like I am not a morning person, so if we had this call at 8 a.m., you'd get a very different version of me than 2 in the afternoon or whatever time it is, right? So, but I had to learn that over the years, right? Like I'm not going to start my mornings out with a big strategic presentation, right? I'm going to start my mornings out with like administrative duties just to get my brain to start to function, and taking a walk or breaks in the day. Like there's so much productivity data that talks about like that we need breaks. That's why we have vacation, right? We need them. Otherwise we burn out, or we work at a much slower rate. And then one of my favorite stats ever, and I love quoting it because it like blows my mind, is anytime you work over 40 hours, your productivity, your ability to be efficient drops by 50%. So 50, like half. So something that takes you an hour all of a sudden takes you 2 hours to do. But I'm going to work. I'm going to keep doing these 15-hour work days, you know, like, and it just doesn't pay off.
It's now I'm somewhat the opposite. I am a morning person. And so if I get up at, like I might be working starting at 7 a.m. And if I might get up at 6 a.m. and, you know, do all the things that I need to do, and then be ready to go at 7 a.m. with a, you know, fresh cup of coffee ready to go. I can get so much done in that next 2 hours or so that, it's amazing how productive it can be. And then at the same time, I have found myself in the afternoon, particularly the late afternoon, staring at a PowerPoint set of slides, thinking, okay, I intellectually know what needs to be done. and it'll just go slow and slow. And it took me a while to recognize when that's happening, the best thing to do is just to shut it down
Oh,
and either like go away for an hour or two and come back, or just go away and come back at 7 a.m. the next morning. And then it's bam, 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 and you get it all done. Not only do you get more done, but it's definitely better work for me. That's my cycle that works.
Yeah, and that's why we have to again change our systems, right? Because we expect everyone to come in at 7 a.m., 8 a.m. and get cranking to be done by 5 or whatever. I'm not gonna be efficient in the morning, right? Give me the 4 to 6 p.m. and I'm cranking, right? Like ready to go. So it's different for everybody, and the more we can honor those differences, the better results we're gonna get, right? Because we all have our on moments and our off moments. Our brains work differently.
And I know there are certain organizations where on-site work requirements absolutely make sense. If you have a factory environment, a manufacturing environment, even if you're not in a manufacturing role, if you are supporting a manufacturing environment and everybody's coming, at a certain place and time, it does make sense that you don't treat the office workers differently, that you have an on-site requirement. I completely get that for the culture.
And I'm not suggesting we're changing the working hours necessarily, but how you structure your working hours can be different.
Well, and I think one of the benefits of that remote or hybrid environment is that you can, as a human, build out there's a term called the ultradian rhythm where most of us, our energy, goes in cycles. So you can plan your work more in alignment with your natural energy rhythm more effectively if you are working remotely. If you're working on site, I think there's an expectation that you punch in and punch out. Okay, we show up at 9 or we show up at 8, whatever time we show up at whatever time we show up, and then the work ends at a certain time. And I don't think it's necessarily fair to say, well, yeah, but we might need you to do something in the evening or at some other time. So I don't know that we get as much productivity out of those on-site white collar workers as we might get out of remote white collar workers. And it's going to be different for every environment, obviously, of course.
And different for everybody, right? Like some people really thrive in being around people. Other people, like the isolation is that's their sweet spot to get to crank the workout, so everyone's different, and not saying we can customize everything to everybody along the way, but the more that we can honor or give some flexibility in the approach, the easier it will be for those individuals to thrive.
And for newer employees, for younger employees in particular, they benefit from being around people. But if you are in a remote environment and you're hiring, new waves of young employees, as a leader, you can be very intentional about that onboarding and realize, okay, I, as a leader, I already have existing relationships with these 30 or 40 people. So this remote thing is working for me. For this new hire, I need to get him or her cemented into these relationships very intentionally. And that's not going to happen unless I help to make it happen. So you may want to do things with whether it's the on-site requirement or your hybrid work, whatever your solution is. Don't assume that your newer employees are just going to build those relationships to the degree that you have them, unless you do something about it. I would think.
Yeah.
What would be, with the book itself? What would be some of the top, I don't know, best practices, tips, the guidance you would tend to give leaders for being effective in today's world?
So the book is structured, I wrote it as more of like a practical guide, right? So how do I show up as the best version of me? And so we really talk about authenticity and strengths-based leadership, and what are those things that work really well for you, kind of get you in flow, get you in that sweet spot zone, and what are those things that you aspire to continue to develop? I think it's a false belief that once you master a skill that you're done, right? So you're always growing, we're always developing, and so really the whole premise, right, is like knowing what it is that works for me, knowing how I want to keep growing, knowing how I want to show up or how I want to be seen, heard, valued, right? And then I wrap it with what I call kind of 3 principles of leadership. And the first is really around just effectiveness, right? And to your point, right, like, do I know do I know where my stuff is? Do I know where I need to be when and how? Do I prioritize my time effectively? Do I time manage effectively, right? So finding your systems, finding the things that allow you to do what it is that you say that you're going to do or what's expected of you. And that's kind of like bare minimum expectation. The second is I call it how to be influential. And we know, as a leader, you get much better results and much greater human connection when you are influencing people versus dictating and using a powerful, authoritative approach, right? So how do I influence people, especially how do I influence people that don't direct report to me? Right? You're going to get it. It's a little different when people do direct report to you, right? Versus then when they don't. So we talk about influence. And then the third area is inspiration, right? So it's one thing to get people to take action, that influence to action, right? But it's a whole other thing if they're excited about it, if they're motivated by it, if they see the what's in it for me benefit, and they really kind of get some enthusiasm there. And we know, again, data wise, right, the more enthusiastic and more bought in people are to things, the better the results. So if I can not only get you to take action, but do it in a much more enthusiastic way, I know that we're going to win across the board. So if you can be yourself as a leader and kind of wrap yourself around those areas, the rest will follow.
I had a gentleman say to me a couple of weeks ago, he said, I can't be everything, but it feels like what you, Dan, are asking me to be is, sometimes a mentor or coach, sometimes a driver, sometimes a project manager, sometimes a therapist, sometimes, and he went on and on and on. And he said, I can't be all of that. He said, I know what my natural gifts are, or my natural instinct. He said, I'm a good project manager. I'm a really good strategic thinker. And he kind of listed his strengths. And then he said, I want to align with my strengths, which is fine. I mean, that he was using all the right language, but he said, it feels like I need to be more. And I don't know that I can be more. I didn't have a great answer for him, because my answer was, yeah, I think you need to be more.
Yeah.
I think that's the nature of the world going forward. We need more from you, which it didn't sit well. And I don't know that it was a great. So how would you respond to that?
Yeah, I think two things come to mind. The first is, maybe they can't do more right now, but is that an area that they want to grow in, right? Like the expectation of leaders today is that adaptability and the ability to kind of flex based off of who you're working with and what the dynamics of the situation are. So is that do you have a desire to grow in that way? Mm-hmm. Yes or no, right? And if the answer is no, then I think the question is, do you really want to be a leader, right? So maybe you maxed out at project management skills and you're great at that thing. And maybe you go back into a real functional role or lead a few less people, but maybe you being the leader of leaders or head of the department or whatever isn't the right place to be. And it's a hard pill for people to swallow because there's so much status and growth that comes with those things. And I think companies also need to think about that too and how they structure organizations. But, if you don't want to be this adaptable, flexible leader who meets people where they are, you're probably not going to be able to meet the needs of the workforce today. And that might be a time to take a separate role.
I had an interesting conversation with a woman who worked in venture capital, and she worked for an venture capital organization that invests hundreds of millions of dollars in startups. And they have an assessment process for senior leaders that they are considering investing in. And the assessment process primarily focuses on that leader's ability to hold two opposing thoughts in their mind at the same time, or to approach a particular problem with two mindsets at the same time. And she said it's a very rare capability, but we find the very best leaders can be alpha and omega. They can be a thing and the opposite of the thing. So they can be a driver and a carer. They can be a warrior and a poet. But she said, we're not looking to change anybody. She said, we're looking to identify those rare individuals who can do both, because we find investing our money with them tends to work out really well. Investing our money where that leader has a certain way, and that's the only way that they operate. With that, we are not as successful. So I think for a lot of us as leaders, we can recognize how hard it is, How hard is it to hold two opposing
Yep.
mindsets two opposing behavior sets to be both, caring and driving at the same time? Um, but her use of the term warrior poet really grabbed my attention. And I think that if there's one, lesson that leaders can take away from this conversation is it's not going to be easy, but being more, if you want to be a leader, is probably going to have to be. You are going to have to figure out how to be more to both your people and your business going forward into the future.
Yeah. And I think it all boils down to just the basic principles of authenticity, right? Like, so if I'm honoring who I am, if I'm honoring who you are, the rest follows, right? And I don't mean to oversimplify it, but it kind of is that simple, right? Get to know the people, understand how they tick, figure it out.
And then if you have real gaps that you cannot, if you say to yourself, I just can never be that, whatever that is, that awareness can be addressed. I mean, you can hire people, you can build a team around you that functions as, your gap fillers, so to speak, in a very productive and positive, authentic sort of way.
And that's why we talk about cognitive diversity, right? We want to have people that can complement the leadership's gaps, right? Or team members' gaps, right? Like, we want to have that, and that again brings better results. So we want that, and just the awareness of knowing where those gaps are can be really helpful.
So Tami Chapek, I want to be respectful of your time, and so I know we're about to wrap up. Like I said before, anyone who wants to get a hold of you, you'll get the contact information, the links, everything in the show notes. So it'll be very easy to reach out to Tami and talk to her. Any final words of advice or guidance that you would want to share with us before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think the big thing, and I'm repeating myself a little bit, is just that, for each person, no matter where you are in your career, no matter what your title is, right? The more that you understand who you are, what your strengths are, what your values are, what makes you get up in the morning, when's the best time of day to work, like, the more you understand these things about yourself, the easier it is to show up and be successful. And then having that mindset to the people around you, understanding who they are, right? Like, so it is a cascade effect or a ripple effect, right? So the more that I can be the best version of me, the more you can be the best version of you. And it's just not that hard. I think we overcomplicate things a lot because of the way systems are structured, because of expectations and roles, right? So I think that's why I want to defy and break some molds, right? I think that we can do this in a much easier, better way.